To order, and the first item will be our land acknowledgement, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki and the district of Sabag-and-Agady, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Next, we have a moment of silent contemplation. Okay. Next, we have the approval of or amendments to the agenda, and I would like to ask if someone would please move an amendment to the agenda to allow for the introduction of our new Director of Parks, Rec, and Culture, and that would be immediately following this item. Councillor Knockwood? So moved by Councillor Knockwood, seconded by Deputy Warden Mitchell, that we add that introduction, and that would be item 5A. Are you ready for the vote?
Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Motion is carried. So that being said, then our next item is the introduction of our new Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, and I'm not sure, Kim, you're taking that?
Thank you, Madam Warden. I would very much like to introduce to Council Alana Tapper. She is on the Staff 5 desk with us this evening. She has joined our senior leadership team Monday of this week, following on the transition between Adam from Parks, Rec, and Culture Director over to the Corporate Services Director role. And we couldn't be more excited. I think, you know, I've been working with her for 3 days now. Adam and her were out today already doing sort of a familiarization tours of some of our assets in the corridor. Alana comes to us from Halifax Regional Municipality, Halifax, I guess now. She was the superintendent of Parks West. So she had over 400 properties. Her and her team managed over 400 properties in their Parks Department, including things like the Halifax Public Gardens, Point Pleasant Park, a number of playgrounds, sports field, ball diamond, cemeteries, you know, the gamut. So with that, she also worked very closely with the programming of those facilities, with the programming staff, and sort of will bring with her that vision that I think East Hants needs for the next 20 years on where we want to go with our parks, recreation, and culture. So very excited. She's got huge shoes to fill from Kate and Adam, but I absolutely believe that she will fill them well. So welcome, Alana. This is your new counsel. She will be providing you advice over the next 20, 30 years. So we might exaggerate things a little bit.
And on behalf of council, I would certainly add a welcome aboard, and we're not nearly as scary as we sound. So thank you. Did you want to say a few words, or? Thank you. Next item is the approval of the minutes of September the 1st, 2021 special meeting of council, the September 21st, 2021 regular meeting of council policy, and September 29th, 2021 regular meeting of council.
Move. Second.
Moved by Councillor Green, seconded by Deputy Warden Mitchell. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion is carried. Next, we'll move to correspondence for information, and that has been in front of councillors for some time. Is there any item that any councillor wishes to bring forward or comment on? Seeing none, we will move to correspondence for decision. You have before you a number of items. Let me bring them up on my screen. First item is an update regarding the former Clarksville School and Community Hall. Who's taking this one? CAO? Okay.
Through you, Madam Warden, this was actually something that came forward from September's Executive Committee meeting. At that meeting, we discussed the process to transition the Clarksville Community Hall from its current ownership to East Hants. The former trustees have asked if East Hants will take over the building and the property. With that, they have had discussions with staff about what will happen following that. We've explained to them that there will be a call for expression of interest as per how we discussed that in the September Executive Committee. There would be community consultation, making sure that if there was another group in the community that wanted to step up and respond to that, they could. We would support them in any way that we can. I have spoken with Elaine. She is fully aware that that is the process that we intend and supports that process. So the letter confirming that conversation is also attached to the agenda. So the motion is on this report that council authorize staff to call for expressions of interest to purchase the Clarksville school property, and that staff are to return to council with a summary of submissions received and a recommendation for the disposal of the property. And that would follow the conveyance of the deed from the Clarksville group to the municipality, which will take a few weeks, but this would happen after that conveyance.
Councillor Perry.
I'm going to move the recommended motion.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Perry, seconded by Councillor Green. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously. So the next item is the appointment of Jason Wiles as a building official for the municipality. And this is... One moment.
Through you, Madam Warden, we're very excited that our new fire inspector, Jason Wiles, has successfully completed all of the coursework required to be a building official in the province of Nova Scotia. I think he's probably the fastest building official that's ever been brought on board in Nova Scotia. So we're asking council to move to appoint Jason Wiles as building official for the municipality of East Hants per section 5.2 of the Building Code Act. He would, of course, be our fire inspector, but also act as a building official, which requires this motion of council.
Councillor Green.
I would move the recommended motion.
Moved by Councillor Green, seconded by Councillor Musa. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously. And the next item is a request from Alistair Dow regarding the use of the Private Ways Act. I assume you're taking this, John? Sure. And that is number 3.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Yes, we received this written request. You'll be familiar with the Private Ways Act by now after the earlier request you dealt with this year. In this case, it's in South Rawdon. The gentleman owns a piece of land on a small lake there, and there's a gap between where a road ends and where his property starts. He's tried to negotiate with that property owner that's in between to gain access, to no effect, so he's requesting that the municipality intervene.
And would I assume that the exact same issues and problems would exist with using this somewhat old legislation to do this? Would be the same as in the previous request we entertained?
It's a very similar situation, yes.
So, we do not have a recommended motion. What is council's wish? Councillor Green.
Correspondence be sent to Mr. Dow explaining that we will not be entertaining the right-of-way to Wellner Lake.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Garden Cole. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously. The next item is correspondence from Dave Hooper on behalf of residents in the Pine Hill Drive, Beach Street, and Lorna Court subdivision in Elmsdale regarding stormwater issues, a briefing note, background, and recommendations for improvements. So, who's Jesse? Go ahead.
Through Madam Warden. From the correspondence, this is related to the development proposal from FH Developments that surrounds the Pine Hill area. And Mr. Hooper is advocating for council's endorsement of any stormwater mitigation that the developer may want to implement. Those types of considerations will come forward when a full application comes forward with the completed design. So the earliest we'll see that from FH Developments would likely be December. The constraint actually isn't their design work, more so the negotiation on road access with the Provincial Department of Public Works with respect to Rolston Drive and Elmwood. Council will have choices at that time, potentially. There's in the storm drainage policy that council has adopted, there is section 6 that talks to potential credits for mitigation of flooding if it benefits our wastewater systems. At this point, we haven't seen anything at the staff level. However, we do know the design group is considering design options to help gain support from the area residents on Pine Hill. Because going beyond just balancing pre and post flows would likely help their efforts in getting community support. So I would anticipate some sort of options to be on the table for consideration, which would be in line with what this correspondence is endorsing. So that's just perspective on the topic. I don't believe there's an official decision to be made from the request from Mr. Hooper at this time.
So, Councillor Perry.
I'll move that we correspond with Mr. Hooper, thanking him for his input, and it will go into consideration once the final report and the final stuff comes back from FH Development as we move forward.
Do we have a seconder? That was a tie. I'm going to say seconded by Councillor Knockwood. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously. Moving along, we have an offer from the Mass Casualty Commission to make a presentation at a future meeting. Executive Police Advisory. More information on the commission can be found at the website on the screen. So I'm not sure who's... So the decision is whether or not we wish to have a presentation from the Mass Casualty Commission. So does anyone wish to? Councillor Rhino.
I've read this and I've read this and I've read this several times. I just can't imagine, get it through my mind, the Mass Casualty Commission wants to go on the road to sell the Mass Casualty Commission. And I mean, that's a poor choice of words, but this is how I see it. It's a tragedy what happened there. But really, to me, the Mass Casualty Commission should go do their work and make recommendations. I see no need, I don't have any questions I'd like to ask. Now I'm speaking personally, but I suggest we respectfully turn them down, and just say we don't require.
So would you be making a motion to notify them that we are not interested in a presentation at this time?
Yeah, so I would make that motion.
Seconded by Councillor Green. Is there any further discussion on the issue? Councillor Perry.
Has there been any other correspondence with this group other than they just want to come talk to us? Because for something of this importance, this seems kind of, and I agree with Councillor Rhino, very ambiguous about what their intent is, just to do a generic presentation that takes 15 to 20 minutes with questions included. Do we know how this has been received at neighboring municipalities or more about it? I just don't, and to build on what Councillor Rhino said, I don't know what the intent of this is. And it kind of makes me think there's why, there's no answer to why they want to come here.
Well, see, the CAO may be able to shed some insight.
Councillors, if you go onto the Mass Casualty Commission website, they do have a community engagement strategy there. They've held a series of public open houses. They've gathered feedback from communities that were impacted by the tragedy. And the way that they describe it is they want to come and talk to the communities who were impacted and get information from those communities about the impact of the mass casualty. So it's somewhat them sharing their work with you, but it's also you sharing the impact of what happened with them from a community perspective. I guess this is the reason I didn't just send them a let's report to council, because I wasn't sure it was something that this council would want to engage in.
Is there any other engagements planned for this area for people who would like to speak up? Because there was a lot of people in this area impacted directly and indirectly from these tragic events. And I know one of the things, you don't have to look very far in the media to hear that people have been screaming about is they haven't been having the opportunity to have their voices heard. And I'm just wondering if, this might not be the best form, but there might be a better form to allow people that have had these experiences to have them recognized and heard from.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm just getting this information from their website. Up until the 29th of September, they were holding open houses. And there's also lots of opportunity on their website to contact them and provide any information to them that you might feel that they need to hear or that is important for you to have them hear and to form part of their report and conclusions. So there's certainly lots of opportunity to engage with this group on a one-on-one level. If people want to do that, they should be encouraged to do that. And again, the open houses that they did throughout the province, this is that next step of engaging with communities and councils.
Okay. That's all I have right now. It's just a tough one because I do think that there might be a voice that wants to be heard, but I just don't, from my district right now, I don't have anything that I would be adding to this conversation. So thank you.
Councillor Rhino.
East Ends was affected by this tragedy. You can't argue that. If the intent is to gauge people and get people's reaction or input from the community, then they should enter into a community meeting, not make a presentation to council. That's my belief, and I don't want to take anything away from them, but I don't see any direct good to do this in front to council. I think this, if the intent is, they should go to the community and let the community tell them their feelings and affect how it affected them. Thank you.
Councillor Knockwood.
I don't know, I think it may be a good idea from my district, District 4, Shubenacadie, where the shooting took place. I think they probably want to know what took place and what's going on, and if they have some concern what happened that day. So, I don't know, I'd like to engage my community, Shubenacadie, the village.
Well,
And like I said, I don't think they can come to council, but wherever, right? It could be the Enfield area with the big stop and Shubenacadie for sure. So, yeah.
CAO.
The open houses that the Casualty Commission, Mass Casualty Commission held were in DeBert, Truro, Millbrook, and Wentworth. So there hasn't really been an open house in this area.
Okay, I think we can follow suit with, what they're doing or whatever.
Perhaps we could add an amendment to the motion saying that with our correspondence, we would suggest that they look at holding an open house for the public of East Hants too.
In the Shuben.
Yeah, I think
In
that'd be,
Shubenacadie
Yeah.
or Enfield areas, for those people to have an opportunity to hear from and speak with.
yeah, because I think people were really scared that day, and I think they have some really big concerns, right? The shoot and the police vehicles were on fire and all that stuff. So yeah, it was pretty bad that day. So, thank you.
Councillor Rhino.
With that, I would, with approval of the seconder, I would add that to my motion that we go, we mentioned that the Shubenacadie area would be accepting of a presentation, or may be accepting of a presentation in that area.
Agreed. So everyone understands that the motion would now be that we would not have the group present to council, but that we would suggest that a presentation to the folks in the Shubenacadie area in particular might be helpful both to them and to the community. Councillor Perry.
Fully in support of the motion. I actually, after hearing that from the CAO, I'm actually quite shocked that they would be approaching us at council before coming to a public meeting in an area that was directly affected. So that to me is really concerning, especially when it comes to this commission. So I fully support putting that in, but I hopefully the letter will be worded enough that, you should speak to the people before you come before council. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously. Next item in correspondence for decision is an email from Greg Roque Deal seeking a change to the speed limit in the area identified on the attached map in Mount Uniacke. The local MLA and RCMP have been made aware of the speeding concerns. Councillor Perry, are you stick handling this one?
I don't know if I'm stick handling it, but the road in question is a provincial road. If the RCMP and the MLA have been notified, that's pretty much all we can do as council towards this topic, because that's not the only road in the area, and I would care to guess in the entire municipality that there are speeding issues and people would like speed looked at. But on the provincial roads, the MLA and the RCMP is about as far as we can go. If they've been notified, I would see that this item has already been dealt with.
Thank you. So no action on this. We'll leave that with the province and the RCMP. And I believe that concludes correspondence for decision. We are scheduled for a public hearing, but not until 7:30. So perhaps we'll start with our PAC report. And over to you, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Warden. The committee held its regular meeting on October 19th, 2021 in council chambers. The following motions are coming forward as a result of this meeting. Item 1, Dr. David Sheehy, amendments to policies and regulations for high flood zone properties final report to be dealt with at a public hearing. Item 2, Angela and Greg Burke request for self-storage in mixed-use center zone. Initial report. The municipality has received an application from Greg Burke to enable self-storage on a property zone mixed-use center MC zone. The zone does not currently permit self-storage. The Planning Advisory Committee recommends that Council authorize staff to schedule an in-person public information meeting to consider the proposal from Greg Burke to amend the MPS and LUB to enable a self-storage use in the mixed-use center MC zone. As chair of the committee, I so move.
We have a seconder, seconded by Councillor Hebb. Is there any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. And the motion has passed unanimously.
Item 3, Beamish Road Plan Update Background Paper. As part of the ongoing plan update, planning staff presented a background paper on Beamish Road to Planning Advisory Committee at their May 2021 meeting. As a result, Council passed Motion C-21-169, directing staff to contact the 17 identified property owners on the south end of Beamish Road about the proposed rezoning. The supplemental staff report dated October 14, 2021 outlined the results of the Beamish Road survey. The Planning Advisory Committee recommends that Council maintain the current rural use land use designation and zone on the subject lands. As chair of the committee, I so move.
Seconded by Councillor Perry. Is there any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously.
As chair of the committee, I move the adoption of this report.
Seconded by Deputy Warden Mitchell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried. We are still about 2 minutes away from the time of the public hearing. I'm thinking we probably do not have time to do the infrastructure and operations report in 2 minutes, so we'll give staff some time to set up for the public hearing, and we will move into that at 7:30. Okay, councillors, we will move to our public hearing. Councilors, this evening we have one item on the public hearing agenda. The purpose of this hearing is for council to hear input from the public prior to making a decision on the proposal. To the members of the public who have chosen to participate this evening, welcome. Please note that council's procedural policy requires that you do not cheer, boo, clap, or otherwise disrupt this hearing. Anyone who wants to comment or ask questions will be provided an opportunity to do so. Tonight, council may approve, reject, or defer its decision on the proposal to a later date. Council approval is required for the proposals to proceed. I will now ask the municipal clerk to outline when the public hearing advertisements were published.
Madam Warden, a public hearing notice appeared in the October 13th and 20th versions of the Chronicle Herald. The notices described the proposal, gave the date and time of the public hearing, and indicated that staff reports were available to the public.
Councilors, the public hearing this evening is for a proposal to amend the official community plan to enable a change of land use for existing buildings in the high-risk floodplain. I would now ask the chair of the Planning Advisory Committee to present his report.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Planning Advisory Committee has considered the proposal on behalf of Municipal Council. The committee has reviewed staff's reports, completed their evaluation, and will make a recommendation to Council during this hearing. Madam Warden, through you, I would now ask staff to present their final report on the proposal.
Thank you, Madam Warden. So, planning staff received the application from Dr. David Sheehy in March of 2021, and the applicant has operated the Shubenacadie Healthcare Centre since 1993. And you can see on the photograph down there on the left-hand side that that's the building that's been used for the health centre, and the aerial photograph on the bottom right of the presentation just outlines in red the property. So the property was changed to a medical clinic following a development agreement with the municipality in 1993, and the applicant has been trying to attract another physician to the clinic to continue on as a medical practice for the last 4 to 5 years, but has been unsuccessful and believes that the chance of being able to recruit a physician is next to nil. So there's a zoning map there on the side of the presentation screen, and you can see the site outlined in red. That green color is the high-risk floodplain zone. The property is located on Highway number 2, and to the west of the property is the Anglican Church, and the building to the east of the property is an existing residential and commercial building, which is operating as Papa K's Pizza. And then to the building to the rear is an existing residential use. So actually, I just wanted to highlight the high-risk floodplain. It extends further than this side of Highway 2. It also extends down on this side. There's properties along here, and then it also continues further around Highway 2 around the corner. So the purpose of the application is to enable the property owner to convert the building to a single unit dwelling so that he can sell the property. It's located in the high-risk floodplain zone, and in that zone, no permanent structures are permitted except for public work structures associated with the provision of pipe services, or unless the structure is accessory to the lawfully existing main use of the property. So a change to residential is not permitted in that zone from the existing use. And it's not enabled under existing policies and regulations. The applicant is requesting a change to our policies and regulations to enable him to change the property over from a medical centre to a residential use. And the existing development agreements on the property, which enables the medical practice, will have to be discharged to enable that to happen. So regulations to limit developments in a high-risk floodplain are intended to protect property owners, but also to enable the land to function as an area where floodwaters can flow freely, which helps to protect other areas from flooding. And once the land use or building is no longer in operation, there is an opportunity to remove that use and potentially the building from the area. But does create a hardship on property owners that own buildings within that high-risk floodplain. A non-conforming use in a high-risk floodplain is different to other zones. There are other zones where you have a non-conforming use that could change to a use that's permitted within that zone, but there's no opportunity in this high-risk floodplain zone because nothing is permitted. And then until the new wastewater treatment plant is completed, staff will undertake an analysis of wastewater generation before issuing permits. 22 properties throughout the whole of the high-risk floodplain zone, which are currently not in residential use. So the amendments will affect all of those properties, enable them to change over to residential use. But in addition to this, the other types of uses were also considered. So the amendments propose that a non-conforming use be permitted to change to a non-conforming single-unit residential as of right. Any existing basements will not be permitted to be used for habitable space. So someone can come in with a use and change to a single-unit residential through the permit process. Other non-conforming uses can be considered by development agreement, subject to the criteria listed in the presentation there. So citizen engagement, a public information meeting was held in July. There were no comments or questions from the public. And then following first reading, questionnaires were mailed to property owners within 300 meters of the property, the applicant's property. And to try and obtain further comments wider than that application property, social media was also used to try and encourage any additional comments. And we received no comments from anyone through the social media promotion of the application. So questionnaires were received from 11 property owners. There were no objections received, but there were a couple of property owners that had some comments. One commented that Nova Scotia is trying to recruit new doctors and kind of questioned the application. But the amendments don't prohibit Dr. Sheehy from selling the medical practice if he decides to and finds a doctor to come into that building. It just enables him to convert to residential should he choose to. One property owner does not want to see multi-unit residential in the area, but this is a bigger discussion, not necessarily related to the amendments today. And should the amendments go ahead, any of those multi-unit residential uses will have to be considered by development agreement. And then, as already was mentioned, notice was placed in the October 13th and 20th editions of the Chronicle Herald. So planning staff have completed their review of the application. Staff are recommending approval of the amendments, and you can see down here on the diagram, we're at the public hearing stage, and then council can approve or refuse the application. And provincial approval is required for all amendments to the municipal planning strategy. Thank you, Madam Warden.
Thank you. Does any member of council have questions for staff? Deputy Warden Mitchell.
Yes, just a quick question. Is this area prone to flooding in the last few years, or?
Through you, Madam Warden, I don't know when the last time it was flooded in this area. It's identified in the flood risk mapping that the CBCL prepared for us as high-risk floodplain. So high risk is flooding at 1 in every 20 years. So there may not have been one recently, but it is in an area of high risk.
Thank you.
Yeah, I lived in that area all my life, and I didn't see no flooding, over 50 years. But now, does this building have a basement?
Through you, Madam Warden, I don't know whether it does or not. The amendments do actually say that if this was to be converted over to residential use, they wouldn't be able to use that basement as a habitable space. But I don't know whether they do or don't have a basement.
And so it was a residential before. Was that before they passed the flood?
Through you, Madam Warden, the changes to make it the medical practice was in 1993, so I believe it was a dwelling prior to that.
Yeah, I can't remember, but when was the floodplain study was done?
I don't recall when the original there was an original one that was prepared by CBCL, and then we had that updated in around 2014, I believe it was. I don't recall when the original one was done. Do you remember, John? 98.
Okay.
98.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Warden. Can you just scroll up to the top where it shows the actual overview of the buildings? So it shows the red marked off area that's in question, and behind it, in that floodplain, as it's called, those look to be newer structures, are they, with the swimming pool there?
Through you, Madam Warden, I don't know the dates of those structures. The floodplain mapping did change in the last review that we did in around 2014. I don't recall if that area behind this building was included in that update, but generally speaking, in Shubenacadie, the area of floodplain did increase. And then as you went down into like the Enfield, Elmsdale area, the floodplain area decreased, but I don't recall how that floodplain related to this specific area.
I see, okay. I was just wondering if those buildings were put up after, or while it was still, considered a floodplain area. In any case, that answers my question. Thank you.
Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Madam Warden. About the basement, it's very concerning for me. I want to know if there's a basement there, and if there is a basement, is there any way we can enforce the new owner not to use it as a habitat?
Through you, Madam Warden, so the regulations, they're not up here on the presentation, but I can just read them back to you. So when if someone came to apply for a permit, the regulations that would allow that permit to be issued say that the use can change to a single unit residential use. Existing non-conforming use may not change to single unit residential use if the original non-conforming use has discontinued. Any existing basement shall not form part of the habitable living space. So we will make it very clear on the permit that any existing basements will not form part of that habitable living space, but we wouldn't go back to enforce that or check whether that had taken place or not.
Yeah, but the permit's gonna be applied for by the doctor now, right? To turn it back into residential, right?
That I believe that's the plan.
So after he finished with the permit, the new resident, are they gonna be aware of the situation, or are we gonna leave them like in the dark, like? I'm afraid that somebody after it's all done and turned to residential and there's basement in it. So they said, well, there's basement, we might as well use it. And if something happened, so I don't know what's the consequences there.
There is no basement.
Oh,
So I'm allowed. Sorry.
okay. Thank you.
There's a 2-foot crawl space. There's been no water in that crawl space for 32 years.
Okay.
Last time the place flooded was in the 1970s.
There will be opportunity for comments, but thank you for that clarification. Does any other councillor have any questions for staff? Seeing none, I would now ask if the applicant has any comments or would like to make a presentation. Yes, please. I believe it should be on.
Yeah, don't really have a formal presentation, but just to deal with some of the questions. I think you asked about those properties around it. Those are residential properties as well. This property was a residential property when we obtained the development agreement to change it into a medical center. So it's totally unsaleable in the current conditions. So I'm in a situation where it's zoned as a medical center only. There is no possible way of obtaining medical manpower. It's actually closer to 10 years I've been looking. I lobbied the health authority, the Minister of Health. I even wrote and spoke to the Minister of Health in my efforts to obtain help there. It's just the situation with the medical manpower in the province, and not just our province, kind of countrywide. So it's just the way it is. There's no way that will continue as a functional medical center. So I have a property that I was unable to use. So it's paying taxes, mortgage, insurance on a property that sat there vacant for a year. So that's what this was all about. But as you know, it does have effects on the other commercial properties that are in this high-risk flood zone area as well. And the only other issue was the basement. It's a 2-foot crawl space. It's not functional space, but there's never been water in there. Any specific questions anyone would have for me?
Anyone have any questions for the applicant? Councillor Lockwood?
Yeah. When was the last flood in Shubenacadie?
The last what?
But you said something about in the 70s?
Yeah, there was a major flood in the early 70s. When was it? 71, 72. That was actually I think it was in March. There was a massive ice jam at the Maitland Bridge, the old abutments of the Maitland Bridge that acted as a huge dam. So that's what they were using as their 1 in 100 year flooding event when they did their study here a few years ago. But that was the last time any of those properties have had any flood damage. Actually, when we were doing some research on that high-risk flood zone area, the Anglican Church right next to me had records going back almost 100 years. And they do have a basement there, and they said they'd never had recorded water in their basement. And it's probably maybe a foot higher than my property. Anyway, just an aside.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Okay. I would now open the floor for comments and questions from the public. You wanted to comment, Rachel? Oh.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I did just want to make a comment about the flood mapping. So the flood mapping that we had done in 2013-14, it did look at climate change as well. So although there may be areas that it may seem that they may not have flooded in the past, it does kind of map that out into the future and looking at how climate change might impact the area. So that's why there may be areas that maybe haven't flooded in the past, but maybe at more of a risk moving forward. Just wants to kind of provide some clarification around that.
We do have a member of the public. Would you provide your name and address, please?
My name's Michael Jodry, and I own a building on the Mill Village Road that's in the high-risk floodplain as well. The only comment that I want to make is without this amendment, it creates a great financial hardship on anyone who owns a building in that high-risk floodplain. If they're held to only being used, the building only being used for the same use as it is right now, you know, a lot of these people, they're building their property is a big part of their retirement plan. Without this amendment, the municipality is creating a huge financial hardship. And so, therefore, I'm supporting Dr. Shee's application.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public have any comments or questions? Does staff have any final comments? I would now ask the chair of the Planning Advisory Committee to present his committee's recommendation.
Thank you, Warden. Planning Advisory Committee recommends that Council give second reading and approve the amendments to the MPS and LUB to enable existing buildings in the high-risk floodplain designation and zone to be used as an alternative use, and approval be given to discharge the development agreements on the property at 2858 Highway 2. As Chair of PAC, I so move.
Moved and seconded. By Councillor Rhino. Are there any final questions or comments from municipal councillors? Councillor Rhino.
Just a comment, I'm fully in support of this. I do remember way back when this was changed a few years ago, the study was done, the recommendation, then a few years later, we changed this to a high-risk floodplain. and I did not support it at the time because of the effects that it's going to have on property values there. And I think that will be reflected when, if this passes and Mr. Sheehy's allowed to sell this property, it's probably not going to be at the great amount that houses are going for today, just because it is in a high-risk floodplain that has only flooded once that I can remember in 1971 because of an ice jam and by the Maitland Bridge or whatever they call it, just to make sure that everybody knows Maitland didn't flood, should be out. So we just want to make that clear. But I wasn't in favor of it at the time, and I think this is a change. We have a shortage of apartments, houses out there in the province. This will probably only end up, with one family, but that's one family in one residential place that more than we have currently. And I support this wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Councillor Knockwood?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Rhino also, but I don't know what global warming got to do with, the flooding and all that, because what I learned about global warming is like the higher areas and mountains and water coming down, to increase flooding, but I can't see no mountains in Shubenacadie. That's the only thing, one Economy Hill.
I guess, Counselor, we could have many meetings debating the ups and downs of global warming
Yeah,
and what
like
may or
that.
may not happen. The
Yeah.
fact remains, we had commissioned a study to identify high-risk floodplain,
yeah,
and this
I-
area was identified in the study, and council did accept the
I would
study.
almost think we should take another look at the study and look. I'd
The
like to see
study
if
was very clear.
Well, like I said, I'll take a look, but if it's clear, it's clear, but it's, I don't think, like global warming is going to affect in the village of Shubenacadie. That's pretty clear too, so, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ward. I guess just to jump on that, the study was complicated, and the Shebe River is complicated because it's tidal, so sea level rise will have an impact on flooding. There's a history of ice jams that you can get there, and then just kind of the regular rainfall event floodings. And what they're telling us, or the experts that did the study told us, is all three of those factors change in the future. So you're going to get more intense rainfall events like we did in whenever Hurricane Beth was, 71 or whatever. You can expect more of that kind of stuff in the future. You are going to have sea level rise. That's already measurable. And ice jam is just a bit of a gamble every year. So the 1 in 20 year, like the high-risk floodplain, was based on the probability of a flood in any given year, and it's 1 in 20. But you can go for 40 or 50 years without a flood, but then you can have 2 floods in a row. Again, it's just a probability every year. So that's, I think, the way to look at it. Thank you.
Okay, motion is on the floor. The question has been called. Oh, I'm sorry. The motion is not on the floor, is it? Okay, okay. So the motion is on the floor. The question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. That concludes tonight's public hearing, and I would like to thank everyone for attending. We're now returned to our committee reports for infrastructure and operations. Over to you, Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Madam Warden. The committee held its regular monthly meeting on October 19, 2021, in council chambers. The following motions are coming forward as a result of the meeting. First motion, speed awareness community signage. On the direction of council, staff have researched the potential for standardized speed awareness signage in order to provide a visual cue for road users, and with the intent of reducing speed across the municipality. The original motion, C21-246, was to direct staff to look into generic speed signage for the Weir Road in Walton. Through discussion on this topic, this was interpreted as a need for all of East Hants, including the current challenges on Weir Road, which happened to be the example given to bring up emotion. There have been several comments and concerns during staff discussions with councilors and residents that highlight that excessive and dangerous speed is an issue in East Hants. The Infrastructure and Operation Committee recommends to Council to approve the design of the speed awareness community signage with the realignment of the East Hants logo as discussed. Pushes the signs up to an amount of $7,500 with a minimum of 25 signs per council district, and have councilors to be responsible for the distribution of the community speed awareness signage, and that this be completed as soon as possible. As the chair of the committee, I so move.
Seconded by the Deputy Warden. Is there any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously.
The second item is flyer litter mitigation options. Staff have been asked to research option to mitigate flyer litter as per motion C21 bracket 173. Move that council discuss a possible flyer delivery bylaw at a future executive committee meeting. The Infrastructure and Operation Committee recommends to council that council accept staff recommendations for flyer delivery options and litter mitigation education be added to the solid waste division work plan for the rest of this fiscal and next fiscal, while also monitoring different approaches being used by other municipalities, with the caveat that the larger flyer distributors are made aware that we are actively considering establishing a bylaw and that a report be brought back to council in July 2022. As the chair of the committee, I so move.
Seconded by Councillor Green. Is there any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously.
As chair of the committee, I move the adoption of this report.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary? Motion is carried. Next, we will move to Parks, Recreation, and Culture. Councillor Rhino.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Council held its regular meeting on October the 19th, 2021 in council chambers. The following motions are coming forward as a result of the meeting. Number one, volunteer recognition event location selection. In preparation of the 2022 East Hants Municipal Volunteer Recognition and Volunteer Firefighter Long Service Awards ceremony, staff is recommending the date of April 29th, 2022, which is during the National Volunteer Week. In keeping with our efforts to move the event throughout the municipality, the 2022 recommended venue is the Mount Uniacke Legion. A sit-down dinner with an award ceremony to follow will take place. So from that, the Parks and Recreation and Culture Committee recommend to council that council approve to host the East Hants Municipal Volunteer Recognition Firefighter Long Service Awards on April 29th, 2022, and that council approve the Mount Uniacke Legion is the location of the 2022 recognition ceremony. Chair of the committee, I do so move.
Moved and seconded. You ready for the question? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed your buzzer, Councilor Perry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just for clarification, as discussed at committee, the long service firefighter awards recipients from 2020 and 2021 will also be attending?
I believe that was the plan.
That was the plan. It's not in the motion. I just want to make sure that's still the plan.
For you, Madam Warden, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll now go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously.
Number 2, COVID-19 discussion. The CAO proposed a potential plan to deal with the COVID proof of vaccination policy, including a test for those who don't provide proof of vaccine. Committee recommended that the policy requiring providing mandatory proof of vaccine similar to the policies of the provincial and federal governments. As a result, the following motion was passed by committee. Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee recommends that the municipality of East Hants implement a mandatory proof of vaccination policy, similar to that of the provincial and federal governments, whereby staff must show proof of vaccination or a valid reason of exemption, with the timeline to be similar to the provincial timeline of 2 months for full vaccination. And staff have prepared draft policies as a result, but that is the motion.
There is another part of that motion, I think, Councillor Rhino, the second part. Oh,
Okay,
two
this-
separate motions,
yes.
sorry. Those were two separate motions. Okay.
Okay, that is two separate motions. All right. As chair of the committee, I do so move this motion, but I do think that there is a follow-up with a potential policy.
Does someone wish to second the motion, or do you wish to hear the CAO's report first? CAO's report first, so we'll hold the motion in abeyance till we hear from the CAO. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Warden. So following the discussion at committee last week, and it wasn't on the agenda, so we weren't prepared in its entirety to deal with it. The two things should have happened. The motion that was made would have been better from a staff perspective if it was to bring a report back on a motion, on a proof of vaccination policy, because creating public policy or especially human resource policy on the fly in a council meeting doesn't answer all the questions that we really needed answered. So I have drafted two policies, one for the staff who work for the municipality and one for councillors and members of the public. And the issues really are the same for both of them. So again, the motion references the provincial and federal policies. The provincial policy, although they have some frequently answered questions out for their staff, as of yesterday afternoon anyway, they hadn't rolled out their policy yet. So I can't mirror that policy until I see it. I have a feeling what's in it, but again, policy such as this, from a legal perspective, the nuances are important. So we want to make sure that if you put this policy in place that we get it right, especially given the mounting legal challenges that, as I start to dig into this, I start to read more about. So from a procedure, I just, there's not enough time between a committee meeting and a council meeting to put together a full vetted policy that you can approve this evening. I do have two drafts that are attached to the agenda. They are, as we discussed at committee, there is sections in there around the exemptions or the request for accommodations. And I've also, HRM and CBRM have not released their policies yet. As of Monday, I think, is when I reached out to those two organizations, which again, they would be good check-in documents from a public policy, human resource policy point of view. CBRM's is with their legal team now, and I will get a copy of it when it's ready. And HRM as well, talking to their CAO's office. When a copy is available, they will share that. So from this point, these two policies would be vetted through our legal team, and then they would be vetted against the other jurisdictions who are following suit. Then, of course, normally during your committee meeting, if we have something on the agenda that is going to be policy related, we would have scheduled a council meeting following the executive committee last Tuesday. That didn't happen. We didn't have a council meeting on the agenda because we didn't expect a policy decision to be coming. So as it stands now, the Municipal Government Act requires you to give 7 days' notice to put a policy in place. So the two policies that are attached to the agenda, there's two options. You can provide notice this evening that you intend to do it at a later date, sometime after November 3rd, or you can just pick your next, and then you would have to have a special meeting of council to deal with the policy. The other option is to give notice of intent to pass the policies at your regular policy meeting in November, provided that we have the legal review and the jurisdictional review done by then. If not, it would be at your next council meeting. It's not something that I would recommend that you rush just to meet a certain date, but your next obvious session would be at the executive committee in November. And if I saw that we weren't going to be ready for that, I would certainly give council notice that it would have to be at the next council meeting, November, at the end of November, the last Wednesday of November. So the motion that was made at committee, the two motions that were made at committee, gave enough direction to move, for me to put these two draft policies in front of you. But I would suggest that you not pass them this evening, but give notice of intent to adopt them following that legal review and jurisdictional review, and then picking a date or at a council meeting when the policies are ready would be appropriate, and then I could bring them forward when they're ready.
Councillor Garden-Cole.
Thank you, Madam Warden. So I'm just trying to get my head around this. So you're proposing that we do this in November at a later date, and then the period, the 60-day period or whatever it is, would start whenever we get this done.
Through you, Madam Chair, the difference between a council and, say, the provincial government is the provincial government put out a mandate and they picked a date. And I'm not exactly sure of the logistics of how that happens, but whoever did that had the authority to do it. Council doesn't have the authority under the Municipal Government Act to set a policy without giving notice that it's going to do so. Committee said that they would authorize the policy, but council has not. So that's why we have that second meeting on committee day to go into council in the formality of a council meeting to approve it. And that's also why if you wanted that 60 days to start sooner, you would pick a date as soon after November 3rd as you thought possible and hold a special meeting of council. And then that date could start once the policy has been approved by council. What I would not recommend is that you give notice that you're going to approve a policy and put a date in it that's not long enough for employees to then make a choice. So if you give notice to approve, but you don't actually approve the policy, and the date is so short that they have no choice but to go out and get at least one vaccination in order to meet the deadline, then you decide that you don't want to approve the policy for whatever reason, then someone has made a significant life choice for them when council hasn't indeed put a policy in place. I would suggest you avoid that scenario.
Thank you.
Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Madam Warden. This was put on the agenda at last minute, and we were not giving much information, and the whole idea behind this is to protect the public and our employees. And at that time, we had to take the information that we had and make a snap decision. And I supported the motion at that time. Having a week to think about it, do some investigation and gathering information and whatever it takes to do that, I think there's an alternative there that we could do, which would give us the same results. And, you know, the point is this may have no or very little impact on the municipality if this goes through, and it could be a huge impact. We don't know that. And rather than err on the side of caution, I would like to not see this motion go through, but an alternative situation which would give us the same results, and that's having the choice to either have your vaccines by a certain date, and if not, then you have to have proof of vaccinations. I guess I look for the CAO. Is that something that?
Testing, Counselor, not proof of vaccinations.
Pardon me?
You said either have the vaccines or proof of vaccination. I think you mean testing as an alternative to proof of vaccination.
Yes, I'm sorry if I misled the committee. Yeah, I think that would be an alternative, which would give us the same results. And I guess I have to CAO. Is that something we can have an alternative policy put there where we can have that choice?
Through you, Madam Warden, that is the policy that is 95% drafted. That is a choice. We have ordered 1,000 tests from Public Health. They're offering an employer program for folks who are putting that policy in place. And they have, the calculation is done by 2 tests per week. So basically they take your entire workforce and times 2 times 5 weeks. So that is a program that we could put in place. You could put that in place much sooner than waiting the 60 days if you wanted to. And I guess council would have to decide again, is that a council policy? Is it a human resource policy? But either way, we could, yes, it's doable. That is what a lot of employers are doing.
If I might weigh in, that is the policy that the CAO as an administrative policy had proposed and intended to follow. It is an HR policy, an administrative policy that the CAO would normally have just put in place. But council chose to weigh in and override that with a council policy. So the answer is yes, that proposal could certainly, would be done almost immediately.
So I guess I'm looking at the procedure. We would have to defeat the motion that's on the floor in order for that to happen, or would we just have that as an option?
If we defeated the motion that's on the floor, assuming that it gets seconded, then we wouldn't need any motion because the CAO could then just proceed through her authority in the HR policy to carry out the administrative policy that she feels would work.
So it would be administrative policy, not a council policy.
Yes. Correct? Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Councillor Rhino.
We're making every effort, this is my own opinion, to stay away from this mandated vaccination. Whether we do it through a legal framework or not, that is my opinion. I do believe wholeheartedly, but by having the mandated vaccination, similar to that of the provincial government and federal governments, it shows leadership. It shows we are in line with trying to keep our people safe, not only our people, our employees, our staff, council itself. It's very hard to try to justify having public meetings out there and asking for proof of vaccination when possibly staff or some of the councillors are inside who are not. It's setting a double standard, and I don't believe that's the way we should go. Even though it's out there that double vax people can still get COVID, but not to the extremity of an unvaccinated person. And, you know, do employees who are double vaccinated feel comfortable? I don't know. I'm no way of telling that, but I would assume that there would be some apprehension on being in close proximity to an unvaccinated person. So I stand by the motion that was made in committee. With a fixed date, I could work around not having a fixed date and come up with proper vetting of the policy through our legal department. I could live with that. But to go back to what I feel is not doing our due diligence and going with testing all the time. Why did they create a vaccine? The vaccine was created to try to eliminate this virus. And if we don't do our part to try to do that, the virus could be around much longer than we hope. So I'm standing by our original motion. Thank you.
Councillor Garden-Cole.
Thank you, Madam Warden. So I'm in agreement with Councillor Rhino. It's, yeah, I understand that some people aren't keen on getting vaccinated. Unfortunately, that's unfortunate. But I will say, for example, because this is part of my personal experience, are the participants in our aquatic center going to be made aware that the children who are unvaccinated taking lessons from instructors who are unvaccinated possibly and unmasked and not keeping social distance, is that going to be something that they're all going to be made aware of so that they can choose to participate or not?
CAO.
Through you, Madam Warden, as far as the protection of the public part of the policy, I would see that there would not be unvaccinated people working with children. We do know that a number of our pool staff, the part-time pool staff, are vaccinated. There's very few that are not. And part of the policy would be that they not work in and around people who may be vulnerable, which would be children.
So how is the staff going to feel about that double standard for, depending on where they're working with it within the municipality, that some of them will get vaccinated, this 10%, and some of them don't have to be?
Through you, Madam Warden, what I heard from council loud and clear last Tuesday was the concern over the patrons of the aquatic center. So to me, that's something that, council is quite strong about, I would say, based on the conversation last Tuesday. So that would be taken into consideration.
Well, actually, I think council last Tuesday, loud and clear, was that it was voted that we were in favor of staff being vaccinated. I just feel like we followed this policy, the policy of the government through these 20 months or however long it's been, and I'm not in favor of veering off on our own plan at this point. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
I would make a slight correction. We have followed the guidance and guidelines of public health since the beginning of the pandemic, and public health has not come forward and advocated for this. This is a policy that the provincial government has done, but it is not at the behest of public health. Is that correct, CAO? I would say so. Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Madam Warden. To the CAO, so the province didn't pass anything yet?
Through you, Madam Warden, the province has made an announcement to their employees, and they've provided them with frequently asked questions, so with dates and expectations and whatnot. But as far as a formal policy goes, I haven't, and maybe the provincial employees in the room have seen one in the last day or two, but there isn't the written policy yet that's been released. I've asked several of my colleagues in different areas of the province and the political and the staff level, and they haven't seen a policy yet that, such as what I've drafted here for you. And I would say to if I could, with Councillor Garden-Cole, I heard council last week, and that is my job, is to put in I heard committee last week. My job is to administer the will of council. So I will do that. I have drafted these policies. I have also had another one drafted before Tuesday of last week. So whatever council would like to do, we will do. If you wanted to weigh in on the other policy, if this one doesn't pass, then you can do that as well. When I say I heard council, I listened to the discussion at council, and that seems to be something that was a concern of almost everybody in the room, so.
Okay, I have no one left to speak.
I'm not
Oh,
done yet.
Sorry,
No,
sorry,
sorry.
Councillor,
Yeah.
carry on.
So last week, I think we were rushed to make a decision. We didn't have enough discussion. And the two municipalities that have deep pocket, that have many employees for one in each job, they didn't do anything yet. So I don't see why we're rushing this. I think we're rushing it too much because, like, we only have we're short already on what we need for employees, and if we lose so many of them, what we're going to do? So I don't see why the rush. I'm not against it, but I think we should take our time, have more discussion about it, and see what the province is going to do first, what the biggest municipality is going to do first, and go for it after that. That's my opinion. I don't know. Thank you.
Councillor Eisner.
Through you, Madam Speaker, just trying to get clarification on this. So we don't have to go by what the provincial government says. So municipality people, there is a separate identity. So within the municipality people, there's a group, we'll call it that don't want to have the vaccination. Do they have a spokesperson that could be more clarification with what they really would want? Because I would rather work with the organization than against the group that's kind of spurring off. But if they have...
I think to get into any discussion such as that would require us to go in camera because that would be personnel-related discussions.
Yes, absolutely.
You want to step out?
You are free to make a motion to move in camera to discuss
Sure.
personnel issue if you wish.
I would like to move in camera, please.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion is, Councillor Head voting nay. So we will go in camera to have discussions that may impact as a personnel issue. Understanding that there was a motion made, but it had not yet been